Good rep.
Did you see that? I benched 135.
Yeah, I mean, I benched like 3 times that.
But I've been working on this for years.
14-year-old boys bench this.
What about strength standards?
Yeah, it's pretty good for a girl.
All I ever wanted to be was good for a girl.
Let's start this video off by saying that there's no true strength standard and that everybody is different, but I also really don't like soft answers, and that's not why you came here. So in this video, I'll give you hard numbers and then spend the entirety of the video backpedaling and explaining why everybody is different and why strength standards are complete bullshit. The reality is that a lot of us shouldn't care, but many of us still do. And I have no interest in being number one, but that's just because I don't want to make those sacrifices. But that doesn't mean I don't take pride in my lifts. And I also have no interest in competing, though Winnie does want to do a powerlifting meet someday, so maybe one day we'll get to see me in a sick onesie.
It's called a singlet.
I'm sorry, a singlet. So why do I care? I like to track my progress and see where that progress puts me. It helps to motivate me and keep me focused. Not that I really care about me versus the world. I've been in the gym long enough to know that finding somebody who benches 315 is rare, and finding that person in the real world is damn near impossible.
You see that, babe? I'm benching 315 now.
Oh my god!
I also realize it's helpful to have something to compare to, as long as you're being realistic and you're not making excuses to whittle down the talent pool until you're the only guy left in the gym benching 225 who weighs exactly 197.4 pounds with arthritis in your left wrist, who's not taking any of that dirty pre-workout, and who was diagnosed with ADHD in middle school. So what is strong? Well, depending on who you ask, everybody's gonna have a different goal. But whether you're a CrossFitter, a powerlifter, a bodybuilder, or whatever, you'll have your own plan. But for this video, we're focusing on strength. And to put it more accurately, we're gonna try to answer this at different levels. That is, if you're a powerlifter or your average gym goer, male or female. If instead you wanna compare you, who works out, to your average person, well, it's a game you're always going to win. You wanna feel like a supermodel? Go to Walmart. You wanna destroy your self-esteem? Go check Instagram. But reality is often somewhere between. Strength standards are commonly based on relative strength. That is, how many times your own body weight you can lift. But they can also be categorized by weight, meaning you weigh a certain amount and you're grouped into categories based on how you perform. And many, but not all, will factor in sex as well. That's because, as a generalization, men will outlift women and bigger people will outlift smaller people. Anatomy, age, sex, experience, and training style aside, standards can give you a ballpark to compare yourself to others, though most standards don't factor in age, which in all honesty is a big factor. Not that I'm making any excuses for my 91-year-old grandmother. Age and sex has nothing to do with how lazy she's become laying in her bed all day. Just kidding. Love you, Gram. To make this work, you'd have to know your 1 rep max, which you could also estimate, though I find exercises where you use reps higher than 5 to be pretty inaccurate in the formula. So 1 single rep through the entire range of motion with proper form. Sure, you could snap your back in half trying to grind out a few more pounds in deadlift, but that probably means you're in it for the wrong reasons, and that journey won't end well. And the problem with standards are that comparisons are a trap. It's about where you started versus where you're at, and comparing yourself to others is a losing game, especially in this social media world we live in. There's a ton of guys and girls out there pushing and pulling insane amounts of weight. I'm not saying you can't dream of pushing the biggest weights ever. It's your life, and I'm not judging you. I'm just saying don't get caught up too much in those that might not be so honest about how they keep that pretty boy physique. And some of those numbers are also from guys using gear, but not that type of gear. But yeah, that kind too. And also from guys using things like bench suits, deadlift suits, or other training gear. So honestly, my best advice is to try not to get too caught up on a chart or some jacked up influencer or some YouTube couple, because honestly, we're not you and we don't care what you lift as long as you're enjoying yourself. And anybody who tells you otherwise probably peaked in high school and has other issues they're not dealing with. Everybody's different. I've seen people who can't squat the bar right after multiple sessions, and I've seen people put up pretty decent numbers on day 1. We all have different backgrounds and abilities to take into consideration. I've seen my brother pick up some pretty heavy stuff on the farm that I couldn't wrap my head around, or arms around for that matter. Now, does that mean he can deadlift 500 pounds? No, but I still think he's stronger than me. So why use strength standards? Well, they can be useful if you want to compare yourself to others or to see how you're progressing in the gym, but it's a slippery slope. They're also useful for creating benchmarks and goals, which are necessary in the gym, especially if you're my UPS guy. And they're helpful in determining what your strong and weak points are so you can target those weak areas as well as track progress. So try not to get too caught up on those charts, but you're already going searching, so here they are. There are a few different types of strength standards, so we're going to cover some of the more popular ones as well as a few others that I find value in. And that means we're going to attempt to cover 7 sets of standards fairly quickly in an attempt to answer the question, well, what is strong? And we can start with one of the more popular ones, and that's the ones developed by Mark Rippetoe and Lon Kilgore, which classify lifters into 5 categories and are also based on body weight. They've changed from labeling them from untrained, novice, intermediate, advanced, and elite because people were confusing those levels with the levels of training in practical programming for strength training. These are a nice set of standards because they present male and female numbers, and they're a little more broadly applicable to most people on levels of experience versus powerlifting standards, which we'll cover next. Powerlifting strength standards exist to categorize and rank competitors in the sport of powerlifting by taking your numbers on the big 3, that is bench, deadlift, and squat, and adding them together to get your total. They can then categorize and break things down into weight classes to keep things fair. Powerlifters focus on these 3 lifts. It's their bread and butter and the reason they train and push themselves and compete. Their numbers are also the furthest thing from your average gym bro. So I'd only recommend comparing yourself here if that's your goal as well. That being said, they're pretty easy to find by figuring out which federation you want to compete in and then go searching for their published numbers. As an example, let's look at some USAPL standards. Just remember for this that these are totals and these are people who signed up and trained for this, so not your average person in the gym. Also, being at the bottom of one of these charts still makes you stronger than most people you'll meet on the street. Also remember that not all federations are drug tested and not all organizations have the same quality of testing. When I competed in the NCAA, getting drug tested was one of the most awkward things you'd ever have to go through. That is, unless you enjoy another man staring at your pee-pee while essentially right up on top of you. Now, I'm not judging you if that's your thing, it just didn't do a whole lot for me. But either way, some numbers are often another reminder that comparing yourself to others is not often only a bad idea or difficult to do, you sometimes have no idea what you're up against. Another popular set of standards was created by Tim Henriquez, which has lifts listed in weights. Lifted. I say that right? Aren't all lifts listed in weights? Lifts listed in weights and also in multiples of body weights, which I find the men's standards to be maybe a little bit higher, maybe I'm just a little bitch, and the women's standards to be a little bit low, or maybe Winnie's just an absolute monster. Which I think she is based on experience, but if I trained her, then I get all the credit. Tone down that celebration, girl. Now, he does come from a powerlifting background, and these were made for athletes that he trained, so I personally find them a bit aggressive, or maybe it's just hard to categorize it all into 3 categories, which is why I prefer Rippetoe's and Kilgore's more broadly encompassing standards. There's also database strength standards like strengthlevel.com, where anyone can input their numbers, which is great because it's a much larger pool, but people can and do inflate their numbers. But it might be more common that many people just aren't lifting to the same standard. But also, if I could count the amount of times I've seen a squat PR not come close to depth. Woo!
Oh, how'd that look?
It looked great. You couldn't even see the safety.
But hey, they're your top Google result, which makes them very popular. And they're fairly accurate, if not a little bit inflated, and they account for both males and females. So what do I think? I think it's pretty common knowledge. Pretty much everybody knows that manhood doesn't start until you're benching 225. And honestly, I've never really been huge on chasing numbers, but if I was put on the spot, and I guess by making this video, I've put myself on the spot, I would say if you can press 1 plate, bench 2 plates, squat 3 plates, and deadlift 4 plates, that's gonna be strong in any commercial gym. And that's no new novel concept. It's actually the same exact standard that Peter Keller, the owner of Fringe Sport, lists in his strength standards video. But that's an accomplishment the vast majority of people will never attempt, which makes you strong no matter what anybody says. At least that's what my mom told me. For the next level of strength that comes after what I just listed, I would look at what I call the general consensus that comes out of experienced, well-versed lifters. Now, just realize there's some generalizations here. No ages, no body weight. And to make things easier, they often move in plate increments, but that's also a bit of reality because that's how we count in the gym. Now, I'm not sure what to call these guys. I don't want to call them internet celebrities because they have real-life accomplishments, and they're very knowledgeable, and I respect their opinion, but there's guys out there like Steve Shaw and Alex Bromley who have the balls to go out there and publish and commit to numbers, and they've done a really good job with them. And let's be honest, by putting themselves out there, they open themselves up to criticism because on the internet, let's be honest, there's a lot of people with some really passionate opinions. Steve Shaw has a couple of videos on the topic, so I'll try to compile a few of them into one table. They cover a broad range of exercises for both men and women. Alex's standards break it down kind of at a commercial gym level for novice trained in that big man level, kind of the ultimate goal, based on your main lifts, but since he's a competitor, also at various competitive levels. So that's kind of my 7 sets of standards and thought process that guide me in determining what's strong. Let me know how he did in the comments, and as always, like, comment, and subscribe to boost us on the algorithm. We really love your support. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.